This lecture is titled Pathogenesis and Pathology of COVID-19 and is meant for teaching of undergraduate students. This is a disclaimer to let everyone know that this presentation is meant solely for teaching purposes. As such, many illustrations have been used from the published papers and from the internet. No copyright infringement is intended. A complete list of the papers or internet image sources used in the presentation are appended at the end of the talk. Many of the images have been cropped and altered for the sake of making it easier to explain to students. Some of the images in which sufficient space was present, the references are inserted at the bottom. In others, the references have been shifted to the end of the talk to make space for making the pictures bigger. This is a free-to-air talk meant for undergraduate teaching, and there are no financial interest or disclosures. COVID-19. Now, the lecture is primarily meant for medical and science students, but of course for other doctors, microbiologists, and scientists who are attending this session. And I'll be covering the basics of SARS-CoV-2 viral infection, how it infects and affects the human cell as well as the human organism, how the disease is produced, what are the molecular mechanisms involved, and its cytokine response and their correlation with clinical features, as well as the immune response and cure. So this famous picture shows the corona or the crown-like appearance of the SARS-CoV-2. This is an RNA virus, single-stranded, which is very large. It's 120 nanometers in size, which is almost the size of chlamydia and half as big as other bacteria like H. influenzae. It has a very large genome of around 30,000 base pairs, of which 2/3 or 20,000 are occupied by a large conserved replicase, which is present in most of the coronaviruses. The more variable areas are the spike, the envelope, the membrane, and the nucleocapsid. So if we cut this coronavirus, we see that these proteins are embedded in a cell membrane, which is derived from the cell membrane. So the membrane of the virus is derived from the cell, whereas the inside shows the RNA embedded in the nuclear plasmic protein. So how does this virus gain entry? So the core or the most important thing is the uh, angiotensin converting enzyme 2. The spike protein binds to this. In the picture you can see ACE2. It binds to it. Subsequent to it, a human protein called transmembrane protein series serine 2 or TMPRSS2 cuts the spike, which causes the fusion peptide to get exposed. So the membrane of the virus and the cell fuse together. Once the RNA is injected into the cytoplasm, there is a translation of that RNA into the replicase and the other proteins, which form the replicase transcriptase complex, which inserts into the endoplasmic reticulum. Once it is inserted there, it generates large number of virions, which then bud out through the Golgi apparatus and come out into the cytoplasm, as you can see here. The spike protein can also fuse the epithelial cells. So if we look at this picture here, it shows that the entire life cycle of the virus takes place in the cytoplasm, does not enter the nucleus at all. But because it has such a complex pathway, it provides a number of sites for drugs to act. So the endocytotic transport as well as the Golgi vesicle transport can be affected by hydroxychloroquine, whereas the replicase which forms the virus is affected by the favipiravir and remdesivir. So these antiviral drugs have their effect by affecting the life cycle of this organism. Now, to understand pathology and pathogenesis of this disease, we have to understand what is this angiotensin 1 and 2. Angiotensin 1 is secreted by the kidney and in the lung by an enzyme called ACE1 or angiotensin converting enzyme 1, it forms the angiotensin 2. Now, the angiotensin 2 is a very deleterious and harmful molecule. It causes high blood pressure. That is why we give anti-ACE inhibitors or angiotensin converting enzyme 1 inhibitors like enalapril, or we give receptor blockers like losartan to block the angiotensin 2 receptors, because if this angiotensin binds to the receptor, it causes acute lung injury, adverse myocardial remodeling, it vasoconstricts, causing rise in blood pressure, and it also affects the vascular permeability. Now, the ACE2 or the angiotensin converting enzyme 2, which is the one to which this virus binds, this has a protective effect. It converts the angiotensin 2 into angiotensin 1,7, which has beneficial effects. Now, the distribution of both ACE2, which is the viral receptor, and the angiotensin 2 receptor to some extent overlap, being present in the lung, kidney mostly. Now, to understand the pathogenesis or the severity of lung, why some people have more severe infection and why some people have less severe infection, you should understand that the amount of ACE2 or converting enzyme 2, which is present in people, keeps varying. Young people have more ACE2, older people have less ACE2. So if you have more ACE2, even if the virus binds to the ACE2 and gets internalized, which carries the receptor with it, sufficient numbers of these are still present, and therefore they can still convert angiotensin 2 into angiotensin 1,7. But in these old patients, patients with hypertension, diabetes, heart failure, in all of these, the angiotensin converting enzyme 2 is deficient or reduced in number. And most of those get internalized when the virus binds to the receptor and gets internalized into the cell. So the number of receptors, the number of the enzyme molecules reduces, and this enzyme is unable to convert angiotensin 2 into angiotensin 1,7. So this is detrimental. So angiotensin 2 is present in excess. It binds to the angiotensin 2 receptor, producing fibrosis, increase in oxygen reactive species, hypertrophy of cardiac muscle, vasoconstriction, high blood pressure, and it even affects the gut microflora. Whereas the lower risk phenotype, which are in the younger people mostly, there is sufficient of these. So angiotensin 1,7 is produced in sufficient quantity and angiotensin is reduced. So angiotensin 1,7 binds to this MAS-R receptor, which is present in kidney and other sites, which is protective. So there is less of fibrosis, less of oxidative mechanism, antioxidant effect, anti-hypertrophic, anti-hypertensive, vasodilatory effect. Similarly, diabetics who have more severe COVID disease also have higher levels of angiotensin 2 because the converting enzyme is less. So this affects the pancreas and the kidney adversely. Similarly, the difference between why children have it less and adults have it more is largely related to how much is the enzyme present. In addition, there are also differences in the immunity. Children have a more adaptive immunity, and so the symptoms are less. We have already covered transmission in detail in a previous talk. I would just like to say something about this infectious dose. You need to have sufficient infectious dose to get the disease, but unfortunately, when the virus is produced from the cell, it's produced in large numbers. So you may have the 300 to 1,000 viral copies being produced from a single cell also. Secondly, the droplet sizes are about 5 microns in size. A single droplet can contain 300 to 1,000 viral copies. And so even a single droplet can infect. However, droplet nuclei, which are the aerosols, they are much smaller in size, and therefore they don't cause that much infection. And you can see here how many droplets can be produced in sneezing, coughing, etc. And as was highlighted, breathing and talking also produces aerosol. Fomites are less important for transmission, but even if it's a 1 in a million chance, when you are dealing with millions of human beings in the community, few cases of fomite transmission are significant and maintain transmission. So we have to maintain our hand hygiene at all times. Super spreaders have already been discussed earlier. Clinical features have been already enumerated to you. They are similar to other viral fevers. So we have fever, cough, fatigue, sputum production, and other these symptoms. It is important to note that higher infecting dose causes more severe infection. This is because if the infection is in the nose or something, you have larger time for the human being to develop antibodies before the virus spreads more, and vice versa. So if you have a asymptomatic period, which is an incubation period, most people have a viral response which lasts a few days and then it subsides and goes away. But some people have more hyperinflammation. There, more severe symptoms are produced, and then it again comes down. But in some patients, there is no resolution and they turn critical. This is largely related to the antibody production. Initially, you have the IgG and then the IgM. So if you look at the antibody immune response, if you have a good immune response, these antibodies are produced, which are neutralizing antibodies. They bind to the virus and they elicit a predominantly M2 macrophage kind of a reaction. So in that, IL-10, which is anti-inflammatory, interferons, which are antiviral, TGF beta, which is protective, these are produced more. There is a higher helper T cell response for antibody production. There is less endothelial activation and good secretory IgA immunity. Therefore, the cytotoxic T cells will attack the infected cells. The virus coming out is neutralized with the antibodies. Macrophages clean up the apoptotic cells and the virus, and there is minimal lung injury. But if you have a dysfunctional immune response, if there is a more of M1 macrophage response, predominantly TNF alpha, which produces fever and inflammation, interleukin 1, which is like acute phase reactant, which causes inflammation, and interleukin 6, which is the most deleterious of all these cytokines, causing the cytokine storm, gets produced. The Th17 type of response rather than helper T cell response can come. Th17 response is pro-inflammatory. There is more endothelial activation. Certain patients have HLA types which have more infection, and some patients have triggering of DIC. In these, there's excessive immune cell attraction into the lung, overproduction of inflammatory cytokines, increased vascular permeability causing pulmonary edema and ARDS, and a systemic cytokine storm, which we will see. Now, lung is the main affected organ apart from the upper respiratory tract, because but the ACE2, the converting enzyme 2 expression, is seen in the CNS, upper airway, blood vessels, lungs, liver, gut, kidneys, heart, eyes. In all of these, it can be there. And another spike 2 receptor called CD147 is additionally present in the eyes and in the vasculature. But predominantly, lungs are the ones which are almost always infected. And if you look at it, even in the early stage, little bit of lung inflammation is always there. As the patient progresses, more and more lung inflammation comes, and patients get more and more severe infection. Then there is resolution. If you look at histology, there is the area of the lung which is affected shows intraalveolar edema and outpouring of cells. The blood vessels in the alveolar septa are more dilated. There is vascular congestion. And as the body repairs, even in patients who have minimal infection, there is some amount of fibrotic response in the affected area of the lung, and subsequently some amount of pneumocyte proliferation. So if you look at this is the normal lung. But some patients have a severe or acute respiratory distress syndrome. In this, the vascular leakage is much more. Therefore, there is a severe outpouring of vascular contents causing this hyaline membrane disease, fibrin laying the alveoli, and thickening of the alveoli with inflammation. And as it even progresses more, there is thick fibrosis like this. The entire lung can be converted into large fibrotic cavitary lesions like this. And secondary infections by bacteria and others can also supervene. This is another lung in which you can see the large areas of solidification, but you can also see some blood clots which are present because a clotting mechanism has been activated, and the corresponding autopsy heart specimen shows right ventricular affection from the lung getting affected. Other features you can see in the lung are pneumocyte fusion, because as you know, the spike protein can fuse the cells. So you get these giant cells. Now, the viral inclusion can sometimes be seen in the cytoplasm. Don't mistake the reactive changes in the nuclei, which are always reactive. The virus is a cytoplasmic virus. You can do immunohistochemistry or in situ hybridization for the virus, which shows its presence in the cytoplasm of these affected pneumocytes and giant cells. Other antibody immunohistochemistry and in situ hybridization show that early in the disease, there is lots of virus being found in the lung. But as the disease progresses, there is more of inflammation. The amount of virus levels in the tissues actually comes down. This is a diagrammatic representation of how the alveolus gets affected, how the fibrin gets deposited, the hyaline membrane is formed, and the fibrosis and the vascular reaction. And later in the healing, there is lots of fibrosis. This is the pneumocyte proliferation. Some patients, there is excessive activation of the vascular endothelium. And some people have also found that because of the CD147, direct blood vessels can be affected by the virus, exposing the endothelial uh, thromboplastins, clotting a clot. So excessive clotting can cause a severe type. So the first type of severe COVID was the ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. The second type is a DIC-like syndrome, where patient predominantly presents with multiple hemorrhagic spots present all over the lungs, body, purpuras, and other areas. Then you have cytokine storms. This is a severe multi-system inflammatory syndrome or the multi-system organ failure. Cytokine storms occur when the inflammation is excessive. So if the normal meter for inflammation is here, this is the normal response. But if the severe inflammation is triggered, then you have much more inflammatory mediator release, which then goes and damages all the organs. So interleukin 1, TNF alpha, they can cause an encephalitis, they can cause myocardial injury, they cause liver injury with tubular necrosis, intestinal flora gets disturbed, the liver gets injured with, and in the lung, it again triggers the acute respiratory distress syndrome. Along with that, you have sepsis, hypoxemia, and viremia also. And this is one of the most severe affection. The worst culprit, well, there are large number of cytokines which are released, but the interleukin 6 is the worst of these, which can be blocked by this tocilizumab and sarilumab, which are being tried to kind of mitigate the effects of these cytokine storm related kind of severe COVID. The fourth kind of severe COVID is when the myocardium is affected. As we saw, this is because of the angiotensin 2 effects, and therefore it causes myocardial injury. It can cause myocardial infarction by triggering thrombosis of the blood vessels of the heart, just like you get a heart attack in atherosclerotic patients. So if you're already prone to atherosclerosis and you have atherosclerotic plaques, clotting can be triggered and you can get a myocardial infarction and die. Can also cause a viral myocarditis because the SARS-CoV-2 can target the myocardial converting enzyme 2 receptors also. In children also, heart can be affected if there's a Kawasaki disease like vasculitis of the heart, which is essentially a immune mechanism which causes damage to the blood vessels of the heart in children. In the kidney, you get acute tubular necrosis, or you can get tubular vacuolization, you can get tubulointerstitial nephritis, all of which can cause another type of severe renal failure like syndrome in the COVID patients. Sometimes you can get these DIC affecting the kidney, causing these microthrombi present inside the vasculature of the glomerulus. So CNS can be directly affected or it can be indirectly affected. Sometimes it can even gain access to the virus, can directly go from the olfactory bulb to the brain also, although more commonly it spreads from the blood vessels and it can cause CNS symptoms. Chilblains like skin affections are also being increasingly described as the virus becomes more common. So we come to the last couple of slides, which is important. We have already seen how immunity is a double-edged sword. That means that little bit of immune reaction is good. Too much of immunity and immune reaction is bad. But it's even more complex than that. We have already seen that neutralizing antibodies are important for neutralizing these, binding to macrophages which predominantly do phagocytosis and get rid of the virus inactivation and infection elimination. There are two ways in which the virus can escape this immune mechanism. First is there is antigenic drift. That means the virus acquires mutations which cause sub-neutralizing antibodies. So the antibodies which initially develop are not neutralizing the virus anymore, but instead they are binding to this and causing internalization into the macrophage. But the virus multiplies within the macrophage instead of the epithelial cells of the lung and comes out multiplied and replicated. So massive cell death and infection spread can happen And as you saw, this M1 type of macrophage is responsible for the cytokine storm also. This is called antibody dependent enhancement, or ADE. It has been described in other coronaviruses. It is there in dengue, which is why the vaccine to dengue fever was stopped, because instead of the antibody protecting the person, the antibody increased the susceptibility of the person, because there was increasing endothelial and macrophage damage and release of cytokines in dengue. A similar phenomena has been observed in some of the other coronaviruses. We don't have evidence about SARS-CoV-2, whether this phenomena occurs or doesn't occur. We are hoping that it does not occur and we get good neutralizing antibodies. So, number of therapies which we are doing, that means hoping for a vaccine, giving plasma, or if the patient himself develops antibodies after exposure to this virus, we are hoping that it causes neutralization of the virus. But in all of these antibody mediated mechanisms, we can have ADE through the FC receptor and through the M1 macrophages. It can cause more damage and more viral proliferation rather than eliminate the virus. So the evidence has to speak for itself. We currently don't have the evidence to comment upon it. We can only pray that this situation does not arise. Thank you very much. Presentation, I would like to acknowledge especially the pictures taken from Dr. Sanjay Mukhopadhyay's talk, A Pulmonary Pathologist's Perspective on COVID-19 ARDS, Diffuse Alveolar Damage, and Hypoxia. In addition, I would also like to say that many of the pictures related to angiotensin converting enzyme were taken from a paper by Gooblam et al., which was published based on their drawings. The other pictures which were used, the primary sources, are listed on this slide as well as this slide and on this slide. And this is a more complete list of the references which were either used for the pictures or for some of the material which I used in the talk. Thank you.